and we are back at the Truesec Reactor. My name is Mikael Nytström. This time we will talk about using the Hydration Toolkit completely to build lab environments. We already discussed and did some simple demos about building VMs, and you can run the VMs anywhere you want. You either on-prem, on your own laptop, or if you want to run them in Azure or Amazon, that's fine too. But we also need to configure things like building a domain controller. We need to have maybe a file server, a print server, and SCOM server, I don't know, whatever you want to have, or SharePoint server. Maybe you want to have some features and functions in Azure as well. But let's focus on just building a couple of VMs completely configured. To do that, we use what we call the hydration kit. It comes from the term hydrate, which means that you just pour water through a hose to build things. And we use that for building lab environments and test environments. It is controlled by a text file, which is an XML file. This is not that big, but you can see here that we have, for instance, some common settings like names and passwords and locations and language and things like that. We have the network defined. In this case, we're going to have one network, and we have the domain. Here's the domain. In this case, we're going to use the fakedomain.com. Don't try to register that. We already have. In this case, the domain will be corp.fakedomain.com. Password, OUs, and we even have all the corresponding domain OUs underneath here, including all the accounts, including all the groups. So we have a complete configured Active Directory, which is perfect when you do tests and labs and validations, since you can rebuild this environment again and again and again with all the accounts that you have in it. We also have all the computers. In this case, it's not going to be a huge environment, but you can imagine yourself that you add things like, domain controllers, file servers, print servers, different sites, site locations, System Center, old Exchange, SharePoint, whatever you want to have. You can even have older operating system if you want as well, as long as it runs PowerShell, which means that no, you can't use this for building an XP environment or Windows Server 2003. That's not going to work. If you go to one of these machines, let's pick the domain controller here. You can see that it belongs to site A. The computer name is going to be labdc01. It belongs to the role of TE-ADDS01. That's a role. And when we will show you that in just a few here. Network adapter 1 is going to be configured according to the following settings. As you can see here, that's the name of the NIC, that's the IP address, that's DNS1 and DNS2, and it's going to be connected to that network. It will have a data disk. Name data disk 01. Size here, well, that's kind of weird. That doesn't work when you run the toolkit from within the operating system. But in theory, we could use the toolkit to build the VMs as well. I'm going to talk about that some other time, not this time. We can also see that it has multiple roles configured. In this case, it will be a ADDS, meaning a domain controller. It's also going to be a DHCP server. And it will have labs, but it will use the non-configuration. And ADDS is going to be having 2016 as the domain forest level. It's going to be the first domain controller. It's going to be installed on the data disk 01, etc., etc., etc. We also have the DHCP, of course, here. Here's the DHCP settings. Yes, that's the settings. Yes, that's the scope. And yes, here is the entire configuration for DHCP. Now, to put this in an XML file is pretty easy. You also need to have a couple of scripts that follows this and make it work, right? So let's go to the toolkit itself. The toolkit itself is not very big. It's actually tiny, like 3 megs, and that's just because we also have labs installed here, or we have the labs files, and they are like 2.71. So if we didn't have labs here, the entire toolkit would be a couple of 100K in size, which is fairly good. You have a bunch of scripts here, but that's not all. You also have a ton of modules here. And if we go into one of these modules, let's go for the ADDS module. We can see in the ADDS module that we have functions to, for instance, create accounts, create base OUs, tie account into groups. You can use these scripts or functions as standalone scripts to build your own hydration kit, or you can use them as is in the existing toolkit. So in this case, we want to build the first domain controller, and that's not going to be very complicated. We already have all the configuration. The only thing we need to have is something to build it on, right? So let's go to my Hyper-V environment here and connect to a machine. This is the Windows Server 2019. It could be a 16, it could be a 2022. I prefer 2022, but in this case it's a 19, and we start it up. It's just a sysprep Windows Server 2019 UI version. Doesn't need to be, but in this case it is. It's just funnier if you can see some kind of UI, but it's not configured in any way, which you're going to see when you fire it up here. Almost there. Well, here we are. So I need to configure this. Next. Accept license. Yes. Put the password in. Hey, we have a VM. And you're going to see that it's far from being configured. Now, I could put the toolkit in the VM. I can use the toolkit to build the VM if I want to, but we're now going to look at the end part of this, meaning configuring the server itself. So minimize that. I'm going to grab my toolkit. Let's just verify that I saved all the files, which is here. Save. They are saved. And toolkit, here we go. Copy. And I'm going to put it on the hard drive here. Now, that's the toolkit. We can see that this machine, for instance, have 4 gigs of RAM. I removed the dynamic memory. I have 2 procs. I do have a data disk, and I do have an operating system disk, and it's connected to the Corp switch, which doesn't have internet connectivity right now. And the only thing we need to do is fire up PowerShell ICE. The only reason I'm doing ICE here is because you can see the script and you can see what's going on in another way. But it's not needed to use ICE. Go away. And we're going to open the toolkit here. And I'm going to open this file. And this is also just for you to have a better understanding what we're trying to do here. Let's move that to 150. It's fine. So I already have this password in. The reason why I want to set the password before I start is that, well, the password is configured in the XML file. So I need to make sure for the reboot to work that we really have the password that I specified. I also need to specify the name of the server. Lab DC01 is going to be the name. First script is going to be to set the path of the toolkit, so it does survive a reboot. Then we need to configure this, and we're going to run the gather script, specifying the server name here, and we're going to specify that we're going to use this file here, which is our configuration file. Let's open that file. And here you can see that it's going to be the exact same file that I had opened in the host computer here. And if we search here for lab DC01, we're going to find lab DC01. According to this, it should have this role, this configuration, IP address, etc., etc. Same as I told you before. So let's run this command. And that means that we should now have data stored in objects. So if I go to $current computer data here and type that out, you can see that we do have this. We do have all the data here. And if I go to do that again, sorry, paste dot network adapters dot network adapter connected to network. Well, that's going to tell me that's connected to the following network. If I do network adapters, it's going to show me that. If I go to I don't know, roles, and let's see what we have there. Computer role. Well, the computer role is going to be TEADS01. So we know that it did run the script, it did collect the data from the XML file. That means that what we now want to do is we want to configure this. We want to configure this by running this little interesting command called hydration deploy server PS1. Now, this is going to take a very long time, so we're going to fast forward this. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely boring. But let's fire it up and let's talk about the result when we get back. Okay, so we're back. Let's log on our new domain controller. I can see that the name here is kind of weird still, but that will change. Haha, it has changed. And IP address has changed. And with a bit of luck, more things have changed. Like it's now a domain controller, it's a DHCP server, and all that stuff. So that means that using the script here, using the toolkit that we are using, which you can download from GitHub, you can build your lab DC in a very short time. In the next episode, we will look at adding more servers, and we will also look at some of the scripts more in detail. Until then, have a nice day. And my name is Mikael Nytström, and this is the Truesec Reactor.